Japan was still rebuilding when a handful of engineers built something nobody expected. Cars stunning enough to rival Italy's finest work. 10 of these machines exist right now, tucked inside private garages and dusty museum corners, though almost no enthusiast could name them today. That's no accident. Several got erased on purpose, buried under mergers, factory shutdowns, and plain bad luck. We're dragging everyone back into daylight. Before this list appears, drop a number, 1 through 10, in the comments below. Let's find out exactly how many you can recognize before I reveal a single name. Number 1 on this list starts in 1967, inside a Hiroshima factory most of the world had never heard of. Mazda had just done something no manufacturer on Earth had managed to pull off at scale. A working rotary engine, smooth enough to redline past 7,000 RPM without shaking itself apart. That engine sat under a body so low and so sharp it looked like it had been sculpted, not stamped. European engineers who tested it walked away rattled. A tiny Japanese company had solved a problem their own labs had abandoned as impossible. Only 1,176 units were ever built. Finding one today feels closer to finding a ghost. Silence followed the Cosmo's reveal. Then came an answer nobody predicted from Nissan. The Silvia CSP 311 arrived a year later, and it wasn't built like a normal production car at all. Workers assembled each body panel by hand, one car at a time, inside a workshop that resembled an atelier more than a factory floor. Total production never crossed 554 units. Most Japanese buyers in 1968 never once saw one on the street. Its price tag sat far above what an average salaryman could justify, which meant the Silvia became something rarer than beautiful. It became invisible. Sharp creases ran down its flanks. The roofline dropped low, almost fastback, years before that shape became fashionable anywhere else. Nissan had built a halo car with no intention of selling many, purely to prove they could. Rarity wasn't the whole story, though. One more car on this list chose the opposite path entirely. Toyota released the Sports 800 that same year, and everything about it pointed toward the everyday driver instead of the elite buyer. Engineers stripped weight from every panel until the finished car came in under 1,600 pounds, light enough for 2 grown men to lift by hand. A Targa-style removable roof panel slid neatly into the trunk, a detail that predated Porsche's version by years. Under the hood sat a modest 790cc engine, nothing close to the Cosmo's ambition, yet it out-cornered cars with twice its power because Toyota had obsessed over aerodynamics instead of raw output. Test drivers nicknamed it the Yodahachi, and the name stuck inside Toyota's own walls for decades. This wasn't a status symbol built to impress dealerships. It was proof that beauty and accessibility didn't have to sit on opposite ends of a price sheet. 3 cars, 3 completely different philosophies, yet all 3 shared a single quiet truth. Japan wasn't copying anyone anymore. That confidence came at a cost most buyers never saw coming. One decision inside a single boardroom would soon decide whether an entire company's legacy survived the decade at all. Honda barely had a car company in 1966, and somehow that turned out to be their biggest advantage. The S800 coupe rolled out of a business that had built motorcycles for most of its history, yet the engine inside this tiny coupe revved to a screaming 9,500 RPM, a number that embarrassed established manufacturers with decades more experience. 4 individual carburetors fed that engine, 1 per cylinder, a setup normally reserved for pure racing machines. Soichiro Honda himself had raced motorcycles across Europe and refused to build anything that couldn't rev like one. Weighing barely 1,600 pounds, the S800 handled like something built for a track rather than a commute. Skeptics inside the industry had dismissed Honda as a motorcycle company playing dress-up. This car ended that argument permanently. Confidence like that rippled outward fast, and Isuzu answered it with pure design ambition instead of raw numbers. Giorgetto Giugiaro sketched the 117 coupe's shape in 1966, years before he became one of the most celebrated automotive designers on the planet. Long creases stretched from the headlights straight back to the tail, a silhouette so clean that Italian design houses reportedly studied it with genuine unease. Early versions were hand-assembled, using a process the Japanese called jukosei, meaning craftsman-built, 1 panel and 1 worker at a time. That method meant fewer than 10 cars left the factory each day at launch. Isuzu wasn't just chasing beauty for its own sake. It was proving a Japanese manufacturer could outdesign Europe on Europe's own terms, using a European designer to do it. Before the next reveal, here's a quick favor worth 30 seconds. Hit subscribe now, because the story coming next involves a company most viewers have honestly never heard of, and its ending still stings decades later. Prince Motor Company built the Skyline Sport Coupe in 1962, hand-assembling every single one inside a workshop that produced barely more than 50 units total. Two doors swept back into a low, wide stance that looked closer to an Italian Grand Tourer than anything else rolling off a Japanese production line at the time. Engineers hand-formed aluminum body panels because no stamping press in the country could shape metal that precisely. Critics called it the most beautiful car Japan had ever produced. Then, in 1966, Nissan absorbed Prince entirely, and the Skyline name survived, while everything else Prince had built quietly vanished from memory. Factories closed, records scattered. A car built with more care than nearly anything else on this list nearly disappeared with them. One merger ended a company. It didn't end the story, because Prince had one more secret still waiting to be told. Hino Motors built trucks and buses for most of its existence. Then in 1965, it released something nobody inside the Japanese government wanted to see succeed. The Contessa coupe wore a body designed by Michelotti, the same Italian studio behind several Triumph models, and the result looked like nothing else built in Japan that decade. Rear-mounted engine, low, wide haunches, a roofline so delicate it seemed to float above the doors. Reviewers praised it as the most sophisticated shape to come out of any Japanese factory to that point. Sales climbed. Export orders followed. Then Japan's own Ministry of International Trade and Industry stepped in, worried that too many small manufacturers chasing passenger cars would weaken the country's position against Western competition. Picture the boardroom. Executives had just watched their most beautiful creation succeed beyond every projection, and officials were telling them to stop anyway. MIDI pushed Hino toward consolidation, and by 1967, Toyota had absorbed the company entirely. Production of the Contessa ended almost overnight, not because customers stopped buying it, not because the engineering failed or the design aged badly. A single agency decided one beautiful, successful car represented an inefficient use of national resources, and that judgment alone erased it. Somewhere between 1,500 and 2,300 coupes left the factory before the line went dark for good. Most of those cars have since disappeared entirely, lost to rust, scrapyards, and decades of nobody bothering to remember them. That kind of ending should feel impossible. It happened twice. Mazda released the Familia rotary coupe in 1968, built on the same rotary technology that had already made the Cosmo Sport famous. Except this version reached further into obscurity than its older sibling ever did. Engineers shaved the body down into something lighter and tighter, a coupe built almost entirely around the sensation of speed rather than luxury or comfort. Its rotary engine produced barely 100 horsepower, yet the car felt alive in a way its numbers never suggested, spinning through revs with none of the vibration a piston engine couldn't avoid. Fewer than 20,000 were ever built across its entire run, and the vast majority stayed inside Japan, invisible to collectors anywhere else on Earth. Purists who've driven both often say the Familia feels more honest than the Cosmo. Smaller, lighter, closer to what a rotary engine was always meant to be before marketing got involved. Two companies, two celebrated cars, and two endings that had nothing to do with what customers actually wanted. One era, one agency, one list of decisions, still shaping which classics survive long enough for anyone to remember them today. A single truth ties every car left on this list together, and it's stranger than anything covered so far. Vignale designed the Compano Spider's body in Italy, then shipped the concept to Daihatsu for production in 1965, and the result undercut nearly everything else on this list in price. A soft top folded neatly behind the seats, chrome trim wrapped around round, almost delicate headlights that gave the whole car a friendly, approachable face compared to its sharper rivals. Daihatsu priced it low enough that ordinary buyers, not just wealthy enthusiasts, could actually afford one. That decision should have made the Compano Spider a sales success story. Instead, Competition inside Japan's crowded small car market crushed it within a few short years, and production ended before most buyers outside Japan ever learned the car existed. Beauty hadn't been the problem, timing had. Somewhere in a private Kyoto collection, one still sits under a cover waiting for someone who understands what they're looking at. Prince Motor Company built one final car before Nissan's merger erased its name from history, and this one closes the loop this video opened back in part 3. The Gloria Super 6 Coupe arrived in 1963, aimed squarely at Japan's smallest, wealthiest buyer segment, rather than at mass-market appeal like the Compano Spider. 6 cylinders sat under a long, elegant hood, an engine configuration almost nobody else in Japan offered at the time. Leather seats, wood trim, a ride quality closer to a European Grand Tourer than anything built domestically before it. Executives and diplomats favored the Gloria specifically because it signaled status without shouting about it, a quieter kind of luxury built for people who never needed to prove anything. Fewer than 1,000 were built before Nissan's takeover folded Prince into a company that no longer controlled its own legacy. The Skyline name survived that merger. The Gloria almost didn't. Most surviving units today live inside private garages, never seeing a public road, guarded by owners who understand exactly how close this car came to vanishing completely. The same fate that nearly swallowed the Skyline whole in part 3. 10 cars. 10 different reasons for disappearing, whether it was a government agency, a corporate merger, poor timing, or simple bad luck. Every single one of them shared a designer, an engineer, or a factory floor obsessed with beauty over profit, and that single obsession is the thread connecting every name on this list. One thing about all 10 still hasn't been said, and it changes how every car on this list should be remembered. None of these 10 cars failed. Japan simply moved faster than the world could watch, and beauty alone couldn't save them from mergers, politics, and bad timing. Here's the twist. One of these 10 is still buyable today, for surprisingly little money. Which one? Tell me in the comments.